What is activity-based costing and how does that relate to cost of quality management? Well, to start with, activity-based costing is the allocation of costs to the specific identified activities that give rise to those costs. And when we're talking in terms of costs, it's very easy to identify the direct costs that go into the production of a product or service, right? It's the overhead of the organization and the indirect costs that cause a problem. And this is where the activity-based cost approach applies. You would assign the amounts of this overhead or indirect cost to specific activities that go into creating the product. Cost of quality is one of those activities that is not directly related to creation of the product. So it would be more of an indirect cost or perhaps in certain circumstances an overhead cost. But the general activities that go into cost of quality are appraisal of cost of quality, prevention of failures there, so that's cost of quality, internal failures, and then external failures, right? So these are subcategories of the prevention costs. So any that way, these are four activities that you would have to identify how those costs are allocated to the activities that go into production of the product. So, but there are numerous issues with this. So one, there's no consensus in how you would approach this, how you would allocate certain overhead costs to these elements of cost of quality, right? They just simply don't fit in very well. It's difficult to trace quality costs to the specific sources that give rise to the cost. So making this bridge is very difficult. And then there's a difficulty in identifying how indirect workers spend their time and how those activities relate to cost of quality. So one approach to doing this, however, is the activity-based costing approach, where you attempt to the best of your ability, apply the ABC method to this cost of quality regime. Now, what are the steps in doing so? Well, you have to divide all of your activities into pools. So you would take these cost of quality activities, divide them up. Then you would identify all the costs that you can associate with any of these given pool of activities, right? You would divide one by the other, so it would result in a cost driver rate. And this metric would be used to assign to any hour or any unit or any other metric you use for assigning a certain amount of activity to a cost. So this metric would be your multiplier to come up with value. Now, as a best practice, the way you're going to have to do this with cost of quality is individual job sampling. You're going to have to apply this method to specific elements of the COQ process for it to be effective, which once again is a very difficult process. But then again, this is how the activity-based costing approach applies to cost of quality or quality cost management.